Season. I think our guys did a great job getting Paul Goldschmidt and Andrew Miller, two significant additions to a team that won 88 games last year. Feel really good about our Major League staff. Good to have Jeff Albert back after he bolted on us for Houston and became a big asset for them down there, but good to have him back. I thought I'd open up to Q&A, see what y'all had in mind and what you're thinking of. If you had any questions on the franchise or what's happening in the baseball world.
When you look at the way that the free agent market has changed in these last two winters and the way that sort of seems to be heading in that direction is maybe the new normal, do you have concerns from an ownership perspective about how that affects the possibility of a labor dispute maybe down the road here?
You know, I don't. Obviously, you know, each labor agreement is different and there are different concerns on both sides when you get to that point where, you know, we got 2-3 years left before we get into the next agreement. It's hard to say, you know, the industry has an ebb and flow to it, so, and we don't need to tell you guys, two significant free agents out there who haven't signed. It's hard to say the reason for it, but you know, others have signed, and I didn't really expect that they would sign early because that's just not the style of the group that's out there. So, you know, we signed a free agent, Andrew Miller, who we felt would really help our club. Other teams have done the same thing. And, you know, there are different ways to improve. You can bring up players from minor leagues, you can make deals, you can sign free agents. Each team has their own situation, and ours was such that we felt if we could make a trade for, you know, I should say Paul Goldschmidt, that's a bit of a reach thinking you can, but, you know, it came together because Arizona was looking to get some young players. We were fortunate to have the kind of players that they wanted. And of course he has 1 year left on his contract, and you know, we think he'll really like our situation. So, you know, we were open for business in a number of ways, trade, free agents, you know, given the constraints we do have, every team has on payroll, and with those two acquisitions, we've beefed up our payroll. So it's, you know, but we feel like it's warranted, and we have a good club going into spring training.
When you talk about Goldschmidt and liking the situation, is your desire to negotiate? I mean, you're not going to negotiate through the presser, but would you like to have him for another few years after this, at least?
You know, whenever a good player comes to the Cardinals, if they have a year left on their contract, that we always think down the road. So we'd love to have him here longer than 1 year, and we'll just see how that plays out. We've been, as you all know, we've been fortunate over the years in making deals for players with 1 year left on their contract and retaining them. Go back to the early 2000s, our farm system wasn't quite as good, and we really built our club around players like that. And of course, Pujols was in the system and came up 2000 time frame. So, you know, we always have that in mind with a 1 year player, but you have to weigh what you give up and what you get back. I think worst case is we get a top draft choice, but that's not our goal when we trade for a player like Paul Goldschmidt.
Bill, this is the second consecutive winter that you guys have been able to add an all-star because of another team choosing to pivot in a different direction to a rebuilding direction. Do you think some of the teams that are choosing to be non-competitive is a problem for baseball, that tanking is something that ought to be addressed and could influence this market?
Yeah, I don't think the word tanking is appropriate. It's not like teams want to lose. I think teams figure out the best way to win. And if they don't think they can win with what they have, and they have assets that they can trade for players that will enable them to win in the future, that's a strategy that teams engage in, and that's a legitimate strategy, because if you don't think your team's quite good enough, everybody wants to win, first of all. And the teams that have bad records, they live and die every game, believe me. I know those owners well. They don't want to lose as many games as maybe they lose if they finish down in the standings. They don't want to lose, period. On the other hand, they make an assessment of the best way to compete, and it's kind of the ebb and flow in the cycles of the game. You see teams do really well for a few years, and then their teams age, and they feel like the best way to compete is maybe in a year or two or three, and you know, that's kind of the nature of the game. And today it's more plausible, because there's a higher degree of certainty, in my view, of the draft. If you draft early in the draft, you're going to get good young, the best young players. And if you trade for young players and they all mature together, you can have a really strong, if not dominant, team. So if you feel you're not competitive, then it's a viable strategy to go younger.
Bill, when